"Daddy, the mean lady took my heart monitor." Emma's terrified scream pierced the air as Carol Patterson stood over my 5-year-old daughter, clutching the life-saving device. What this HOA Karen didn't know. I'm the district attorney, and she just committed several felonies against my dying child. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun felt different that day. Maybe it was because little Emma had been up most of the night, her tiny chest rising and falling in uneven patterns that made my heart skip beats. At 5 years old, she shouldn't have to carry the weight of a failing heart, but life doesn't ask permission before it breaks you. I'd been awake since 3 in the morning, listening to the soft beeping of her heart monitor, watching the numbers dance across the small screen. The doctors had warned us that Emma's condition was deteriorating. Her tiny heart, born with multiple defects, was working harder than any 5-year-old's heart should have to work. "Daddy, will I be okay today?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper as I helped her put on the small backpack that held her portable heart monitor. The device was her lifeline, constantly checking her heart rhythm and ready to alert us if anything went wrong. The backpack itself was decorated with colorful butterflies, Emma's favorite creatures. She'd insisted on the design when we first got the monitor 6 months ago. "If I have to wear it everywhere, it should be pretty," she'd said with the matter-of-fact wisdom that only children possess. "You'll be perfect, sweetheart," I said, kissing her forehead. Her skin felt warm but not feverish. "Remember, if you feel tired, just sit down and rest. The monitor will take care of everything else." Emma nodded, her big brown eyes trusting me completely. Those eyes were exactly like her mother's had been. Sarah had died in a car accident when Emma was just 2 years old, leaving me to navigate this medical nightmare alone. Sometimes I wondered if I was strong enough to be both mother and father to a child with such complex needs. That trust in Emma's eyes was both my greatest blessing and my heaviest burden. As the district attorney for our county, I'd put away countless criminals, faced down murderers and drug dealers without flinching. But nothing scared me more than the thought of failing my daughter. We lived in Willowbrook Estates, one of those planned communities where every lawn looked perfect and every house followed strict rules. The HOA made sure of that. When Emma and I first moved here 3 years ago, I thought it would be the perfect place to raise a child with special needs. The streets were safe, the neighbors seemed friendly, and the community center had programs for children with disabilities. Most neighbors were kind, understanding about Emma's condition. They'd wave when they saw us on our daily walks, always asking how she was feeling. Mrs. Chin from across the street would bring over homemade soup when Emma had bad days. The Martinez family next door had installed a small garden specifically with flowers that Emma loved to look at from our kitchen window. But then there was Mrs. Patterson. Carol Patterson had moved in 6 months ago and immediately appointed herself as the neighborhood's unofficial rule enforcer. She was a woman in her early 60s, recently divorced, with silver hair always pulled back in a severe bun. She measured grass length with an actual ruler, counted how many seconds Christmas lights stayed up past January 1st, and seemed to find joy in making others miserable. The official HOA board was actually reasonable, but Carol acted like she owned the place. Her first complaint had been about our wheelchair ramp. Even though it was professionally installed and met all ADA requirements, Carol had filed a formal complaint claiming it was aesthetically inconsistent with neighborhood standards. The HOA board had quickly dismissed her complaint, but that only seemed to fuel her determination to find fault with our family. That Tuesday started like any other. I was working from home, preparing for a major case involving a child abuse ring that had been operating in 3 counties. The irony wasn't lost on me that I spent my days protecting children from monsters, while struggling to protect my own daughter from something as simple as prejudice. Emma had been playing quietly in our backyard on the small playground set I'd installed. She loved the swings, though she could only use them for a few minutes at a time before needing to rest. I could see her from my office window, sitting on the grass, carefully arranging her collection of smooth rocks that she'd been gathering for weeks. "Daddy, Daddy, the mean lady is here again." Emma's voice, high and frightened, cut through my concentration. My blood ran cold. Through the window, I could see Carol Patterson marching across our lawn, her face twisted with that familiar look of manufactured outrage. Emma was hiding behind my legs, her small body trembling. "What's wrong, baby?" I asked, kneeling down to her level. I could feel the rapid beating of her heart through the thin fabric of her shirt. "She said my backpack is ugly and doesn't belong in the neighborhood. She said sick kids shouldn't play outside where people can see them. She said I make the other children uncomfortable and that my heart beeps too loud." The words hit me like a physical blow. Emma's heart monitor did make soft beeping sounds, barely audible unless you were standing right next to her. How could anyone complain about the sound of a child's life-saving equipment? She also said that children like me should stay inside so we don't scare the normal kids, Emma continued, her voice getting smaller with each word. I felt rage building in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm for Emma's sake. You're normal, sweetheart. You're perfect exactly as you are. How could anyone say such things to a child? I stood up, ready to confront Carol, but she was already at our front door, pounding with her fist like she was trying to break it down. Open up. I know you're in there. Carol's shrill voice cut through the morning air. I opened the door, keeping Emma behind me. Mrs. Patterson, what can I do for you? That child of yours is violating community standards, she snapped, pointing at Emma like she was some kind of criminal. Walking around with that ridiculous backpack making everyone uncomfortable. This is a family neighborhood, not some kind of medical facility. I noticed she was holding a folder thick with papers. This wasn't a spontaneous complaint. She'd been preparing for this confrontation. Emma has a heart condition, I said calmly, though my hands were clenched into fists. That backpack contains her heart monitor. It's medically necessary. I don't care what excuses you have. Carol's voice got louder. The HOA rules clearly state that all outdoor equipment must be aesthetically pleasing. That thing is an eyesore. And the noise it makes is disruptive to the peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood. Emma tugged on my shirt. Daddy, what's an eyesore? My heart broke a little more. Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. Furthermore, Carol continued, waving her folder, I've been documenting the disruption this child causes. The constant medical equipment, the frequent ambulance visits, the special accommodations. This neighborhood has standards. The ambulance visits she was referring to had happened exactly twice in the 3 years we'd lived here, both times when Emma had experienced serious arrhythmias that required immediate medical attention. She needs to stop wearing that thing outside or I'll have to take action, Carol threatened. Mrs. Patterson, I suggest you research the Americans with Disabilities Act before you make any more threats, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Don't quote law at me, she spat. I know my rights as a homeowner. I have the right to live in a community that maintains certain standards. She huffed and stormed away, but I could see this wasn't over. Carol Patterson had that look in her eyes, the look of someone who'd made up their mind to cause trouble. Over the next few days things escalated rapidly. Carol started following Emma around the neighborhood, taking pictures of her playing with her heart monitor backpack. She sent daily emails to the HOA board, demanding action. She even called the non-emergency police line to report suspicious medical equipment in the neighborhood. But that wasn't the worst part. Carol began approaching other children in the neighborhood, telling them that Emma was contagious, and that they shouldn't play with her. 7-year-old Tommy Martinez came home crying one day because Carol had told him that Emma's heart condition might spread to him if he got too close. The Martinez family was furious and complained to the HOA, but Carol claimed she was just educating the children about health and safety. Emma started having nightmares. She'd wake up crying, asking if her heart monitor was really scary to other people. She began hiding the device under loose clothing, which made it harder for the monitor to work properly and compromised her safety. Daddy, maybe the mean lady is right, Emma said one evening as I was helping her with her bedtime medications. She had to take 4 different heart medications twice a day, a routine that had become as natural as brushing her teeth. Right about what, sweetheart? Maybe I shouldn't go outside. Maybe I do scare the other kids. I sat on her bed, careful not to disturb the various wires and monitors that helped keep her alive through the night. Emma, look at me. You are not scary. You are not contagious. You are a brave, beautiful little girl who happens to need some extra help with her heart. But why does she hate me so much? Emma asked, tears rolling down her cheeks. I chose my words carefully. Some people are afraid of things they don't understand. Mrs. Patterson doesn't understand that being different doesn't mean being wrong or bad. The HOA board president, Mr. Johnson, called me personally to apologize. Tom, I'm so sorry about this. Mrs. Patterson doesn't speak for the board. We've reviewed the regulations she's citing, and none of them apply to medical equipment. Emma is welcome to play anywhere in the neighborhood, with whatever medical equipment she needs. But Carol didn't stop. She escalated her campaign, creating a Facebook group called Maintaining Willowbrook Standards, where she posted photos of Emma playing in various neighborhood locations, always focusing on her medical equipment. She started a petition to review policies regarding residents with ongoing medical situations. Most residents refused to sign, and several complained to the HOA about Carol's behavior, But the harassment was taking its toll on Emma. "Daddy, why does the mean lady hate me?" Emma asked one evening as I tucked her into bed. I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. "Some people don't understand that being different is okay. You're not different in a bad way, Emma. You're special. You're brave and strong, and you have the biggest heart of anyone I know." "But my heart is broken," she said, placing her small hand on her chest. "Your heart works differently," I corrected gently. "But it's full of love, and that's what matters most." Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Daddy, if I have to go to heaven like Mommy, will my heart be fixed there?" The question hit me like a truck. Emma rarely talked about death, though I knew she understood that her condition was serious. The doctors had been honest with us. Emma's heart was deteriorating, and despite the medications and monitoring, her prognosis wasn't good. "Your heart will be perfect wherever you go, sweetheart. But you're staying right here with Daddy for a very long time." I hoped I was telling the truth. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my home office on an important call with the state attorney general about a corruption case that involved several local officials. The call was crucial. We were discussing wiretaps and immunity deals. Then I heard Emma screaming outside. Not the kind of scream from a scraped knee or a bee sting. This was pure terror. I dropped the phone and ran outside to find Carol Patterson standing over Emma, who was on the ground crying. The heart monitor backpack was in Carol's hands. "Give that back." Emma was sobbing, reaching for her lifeline. Her face was already pale, and I could see the telltale blue tinge around her lips that indicated her heart was struggling. "This ugly thing is coming with me to the HOA office," Carol said coldly. "Maybe when they see how disruptive this equipment is, they'll finally take action." "You can't take that," Emma cried. "I need it. Daddy said I always have to wear it." "Mrs. Patterson, give me that device right now," I said, my voice deadly calm. "No. I'm confiscating this as evidence of HOA violations." Emma's lips were starting to turn blue. Without her monitor, we had no way of knowing if her heart was going into dangerous rhythms. More importantly, the monitor wasn't just for observation. It was programmed to deliver electrical stimulation if her heart stopped beating properly. I pulled out my phone to call 911, but Carol grabbed it from my hands. "No calling for help until you admit this child doesn't belong in this neighborhood." That's when something inside me snapped. Not as a father, as a prosecutor who'd seen too many bullies hurt innocent people. "Emma, go inside and call 911 from the house phone," I said calmly. "Tell them your heart monitor was stolen and you need an ambulance." "She's not calling anyone," Carol shouted, but Emma was already running toward the house, stumbling slightly as her compromised heart struggled to pump enough blood. "Mrs. Patterson, you've just committed several felonies," I said, pulling out my backup phone. "Theft of medical equipment, child endangerment, and assault on a minor." "You can't scare me with your legal threats," she laughed. "I know my rights." "Actually, you don't." I speed-dialed my office. "This is District Attorney Thomas Mitchell. I need units at my home address immediately. I have a suspect in custody for theft of medical equipment and child endangerment." Carol's face went white. "District Attorney? You're just trying to scare me." "Ma'am, I'm the elected district attorney for this county. I prosecute felonies for a living. You just committed several of them in front of multiple witnesses." I could see neighbors starting to gather, drawn by Emma's screams and the commotion. Mrs. Chin was recording everything on her phone. Within minutes, sirens filled the air. 2 police cars and an ambulance arrived simultaneously. The paramedics rushed to Emma, who was sitting on our front porch steps, her face pale and her breathing shallow. "Where's her monitor?" the lead paramedic asked urgently. I pointed to Carol, who was still clutching the backpack like some kind of trophy. She took it. Officer Rodriguez, someone I'd worked with on many cases, approached Carol with his hand extended. "Ma'am, I need you to hand over that medical device immediately. This is harassment." Carol protested. "I'm being persecuted for trying to maintain community standards." "Ma'am, you're holding medical equipment that belongs to a child with a heart condition. Hand it over now, or you'll be arrested for child endangerment." The paramedic, a veteran named Mike Chin who'd been treating Emma for years, was getting impatient. "Officer, I need that device now. This child is in immediate medical danger without it." Reluctantly, Carol handed over the backpack. The paramedics immediately began reconnecting Emma's heart monitor. The readings were alarming. The stress had triggered a dangerous arrhythmia, and her heart rate was over 180 beats per minute. "We need to transport her to the hospital for observation," Mike told me. "Her heart rhythm is unstable." As Emma was loaded into the ambulance, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Daddy, I was so scared. I thought my heart was going to stop." I climbed into the ambulance with her, holding her small hand as we drove to the hospital. Behind us, I could see Officer Rodriguez placing Carol Patterson in handcuffs. At the hospital, doctors confirmed that the stress had triggered a dangerous arrhythmia. Emma had to stay overnight for monitoring. As I sat beside her bed, watching the hospital's heart monitor track her fragile heartbeat, I made a decision. This wasn't just about my daughter anymore. This was about every child, every person with disabilities who'd been bullied by people like Carol Patterson. As district attorney, I had the power to make sure this never happened again. Dr. Amanda Foster, Emma's cardiologist, pulled me aside during the night. "Tom, I need to be honest with you. The stress from today's incident has caused some concerning changes in Emma's heart rhythm. We're going to need to adjust her medications and possibly consider more aggressive interventions." The weight of those words settled over me like a dark cloud. Emma's condition was already fragile. This attack had potentially shortened her life. The next morning, I called my assistant district attorney. "Sarah, I need you to research every possible charge we can bring against Carol Patterson. I want harassment, child endangerment, theft of medical equipment, assault, and anything else that fits." "Tom, are you sure you want to prosecute this personally? Given that it involves Emma?" "That's exactly why I need to prosecute this personally. This woman terrorized my 5-year-old daughter and put her life at risk. If I don't take a stand, who will?" The case moved quickly. Carol Patterson was formally charged with child endangerment, theft of medical equipment, harassment, assault, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Her lawyer tried to argue that she was just trying to enforce HOA rules, but the evidence was overwhelming. During the investigation, we discovered that Carol had a history of targeting families with disabled children. In her previous neighborhood in Arizona, she'd harassed a family with an autistic son, claiming his stimming behaviors were disruptive to property values. She'd also reported their therapeutic trampoline as a noise violation, and tried to have their service dog banned from common areas. In another case in California, she'd reported a neighbor's wheelchair ramp as an unauthorized modification that violated deed restrictions. When the family fought back, she'd escalated to calling CPS, falsely claiming that the parents were neglecting their disabled daughter. "This woman is a serial predator who targets vulnerable families," I told my team. "She finds families with disabled children and systematically harasses them until they move away." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Emma was feeling better physically, but the incident had left her more anxious about going outside. She'd wake up at night sometimes asking if the mean lady was coming back. "She can't hurt you anymore, sweetheart," I'd tell her. "Daddy's making sure of that." But Carol wasn't going quietly. She hired an expensive lawyer from Phoenix and started a social media campaign, claiming she was being persecuted for standing up for neighborhood values. She painted herself as the victim, saying that certain people were using their children's medical conditions to get special treatment. Her lawyer, a man named Richard Blackwood who specialized in defending discrimination cases, tried to argue that Carol's actions were protected speech under the First Amendment. Mrs. Patterson was exercising her right to free speech and her right to petition her local government about legitimate community concerns, he argued in court filings. The community response was swift and decisive. Neighbors who'd barely spoken to each other before came together to support Emma. Mrs. Chin, who lived across the street, organized a heart-themed block party where everyone wore red to show support for children with heart conditions. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, whose son had Down syndrome, shared their own stories of dealing with discrimination. "What happened to Emma could happen to any of our children," Mrs. Williams said at a community meeting. "We have to stand together." The Martinez family started a petition supporting Emma's right to live normally in the neighborhood. Within days, they had over 300 signatures from residents throughout Willowbrook Estates. The HOA board called an emergency meeting and formally censured Carol Patterson's behavior. They also passed a resolution explicitly protecting the rights of residents with medical conditions and disabilities, and established a fund to help families dealing with medical discrimination. But the most surprising support came from an unexpected source. Dr. Amanda Foster, the pediatric cardiologist who'd been treating Emma since birth, volunteered to testify at the trial. "What Mrs. Patterson did wasn't just cruel," Dr. Foster explained during a pretrial meeting. "It was medically dangerous. Emma's heart monitor isn't just a convenience, it's life-saving equipment. The device monitors her heart rhythm constantly and can deliver electrical stimulation if her heart stops beating properly. Removing it from a child with her condition could have been fatal. Dr. Foster also provided medical records showing how the stress from Carol's harassment had affected Emma's condition. The psychological trauma from repeated harassment has measurable effects on children with heart conditions. Emma's heart rhythms became more irregular in the weeks following Mrs. Patterson's initial complaints. As the trial date approached, Carol's lawyer made several attempts to negotiate a plea deal. They offered community service, anger management classes, and a restraining order. But I wasn't interested in easy solutions. This case is about more than punishment, I told my team. It's about setting a precedent. People with disabilities have the right to live in their communities without fear of harassment or discrimination. The trial began on a Monday in late October. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, disability rights advocates, and local media. Emma was too young to testify, but the case was strong without her direct testimony. Officer Rodriguez described the scene he'd found: a 5-year-old girl in medical distress, her life-saving equipment held hostage by a woman who showed no remorse. The paramedics testified about the medical emergency caused by the missing heart monitor. But the most powerful testimony came from our neighbors. One by one they described Carol's campaign of harassment, her cruel comments about Emma, and her complete lack of empathy for a sick child. Mrs. Chin, who normally spoke very softly, found her voice in that courtroom. I watched that woman make a little girl cry just for being different. Emma never hurt anyone. She just wanted to play like other children. Mrs. Patterson told my own daughter that Emma was contagious and dangerous. She tried to turn children against each other. Tommy Martinez, now 8 years old, was allowed to testify briefly about how Carol had frightened him about Emma's condition. She told me Emma's heart was broken and I might catch it if I played with her. But Emma's really nice and she shares her toys. I don't understand why the lady was so mean. Carol's defense was exactly what I expected. A lot of talk about property values and community standards, but no real justification for terrorizing a child. Her lawyer tried to argue that she'd been protecting the community's interests, but the jury wasn't buying it. Mrs. Patterson was simply trying to maintain the high standards that make Willowbrook Estates a desirable place to live, Blackwood argued. Her concerns about medical equipment in common areas were legitimate. But when the prosecutor presented evidence of Carol's pattern of targeting disabled children in multiple states, the defense crumbled. During my closing argument, I didn't talk about legal precedents or complex statutes. I talked about Emma. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a 5-year-old girl who was born with a broken heart. Not broken in spirit, Emma Mitchell has more courage and joy than most adults I know. Her heart is broken medically, and she needs special equipment to stay alive. The defendant decided that Emma's medical needs were inconvenient to her vision of the perfect neighborhood. She decided that a sick child didn't deserve to play outside, didn't deserve to feel safe in her own community. And when Emma's father, that's me, tried to protect his daughter, the defendant escalated her harassment to the point where she literally stole life-saving medical equipment from a child. I paused, looking at each juror. Emma Mitchell has a medical condition, but she's not broken. She's not wrong. She's not an eyesore. She's a little girl who loves butterflies and fairy tales and playing in her backyard. She deserves to live without fear, just like every other child in our community. The defendant had choices. She could have chosen kindness. She could have chosen understanding. She could have chosen to be the kind of neighbor who makes a community stronger. Instead, she chose cruelty. She chose to target the most vulnerable member of our neighborhood. I'm asking you to send a message that this behavior will not be tolerated. Not in our community, not anywhere. Children with disabilities have the right to live their lives without harassment. They have the right to medical equipment that keeps them alive. They have the right to play outside without being called names or having their medical devices stolen. Find the defendant guilty. Not just for Emma, but for every child who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong because they're different. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up with the verdict. On the charge of child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of theft of medical equipment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of harassment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of assault, we find the defendant guilty. Carol Patterson was sentenced to 6 months in jail, 2 years of probation, and 500 hours of community service working with disabled children. She was also ordered to pay restitution for Emma's medical expenses and to have no contact with our family. But the real victory came afterward. The case received national attention, and legislators in our state passed Emma's Law. making it a specific felony to interfere with or steal medical equipment from people with disabilities. Disability rights organizations across the country praised the verdict. The case was cited in training materials for HOA boards, and similar laws were proposed in 12 other states. More importantly, Emma started playing outside again. She made friends with other children in the neighborhood who thought her heart monitor backpack was cool and wanted to know how it worked. 6 months after the trial, Emma and I were walking through the neighborhood when she suddenly stopped and pointed to a moving truck. "Daddy, look. Someone new is moving in." I looked where she was pointing. A family was unloading their truck, and I could see a young boy in a wheelchair playing in the front yard. "Should we go say hello?" I asked Emma. She nodded enthusiastically and ran ahead of me. "Hi, I'm Emma. What's your name?" "I'm Jake," the boy replied shyly. "That's a really cool wheelchair. I have cool medical stuff too." Emma turned around to show him her heart monitor backpack. "It helps keep my heart working right." "What does your wheelchair do?" "It helps me get around because my legs don't work very well," Jake explained. "That's awesome. Do you want to be friends? I know all the best places to play around here." As I watched Emma welcome Jake to the neighborhood, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not just hope for Emma's health, but hope for the kind of community we were building. Jake's mother, a woman named Lisa, approached me with tears in her eyes. "We moved here from Texas because of what happened to your daughter. We read about the case online, and we knew this would be a safe place for Jake." "It is," I assured her. "And if anyone gives you trouble, you call me directly." Later that evening, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at me with those big brown eyes. "Daddy, I'm glad the mean lady is gone, but I'm more glad that Jake is here. He seems lonely." "That's very thoughtful of you, sweetheart. Do you think there are other kids like me and Jake who need friends?" I smiled, remembering why I'd fallen in love with this little girl's enormous heart. "I'm sure there are, Emma. I'm sure there are. Then we should find them and be their friends too." As I kissed her goodnight, I realized that Carol Patterson had unknowingly given us a gift. She'd shown Emma what cruelty looked like, which made Emma even more determined to show kindness. She tried to make Emma feel ashamed of being different, but instead, Emma had learned to celebrate differences in others. The heart monitor still beeped softly beside Emma's bed, tracking the rhythm of her brave little heart. But now it sounded different to me. Not like an alarm or a warning, but like a lullaby, the sound of a fighter who refused to let anyone dim her light. Emma's heart might be broken medically, but her spirit was unbreakable. And watching her sleep peacefully, no longer afraid of the mean lady, I knew that sometimes the most important battles we fight aren't in courtrooms or against criminals. Sometimes they're fought by 5-year-old girls who teach us that being different isn't something to hide, it's something to celebrate. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about making sure no child ever has to feel ashamed of the medical equipment that keeps them alive. Emma's law would protect other children, but Emma herself had already won the most important victory of all. She'd kept her joy, her kindness, and her trust in the world, despite everything Carol Patterson had tried to take from her. And as her father watching over her dreams, I knew that was the greatest victory of all.